gentlemen, we're here for the Troy City Council Special Study Session agenda of April 26th. Welcome. And I remind everyone, if they have a cell phone, please turn it off completely. If you have it on vibrate, it affects our sound system. So that's my usual announcement every time. Okay, can we have the roll call, Mrs. Bartholomew?
Mayor Shelley?
Here.
Councilmember Beltramini? Present. Fleming?
Here.
Howard? Kerwin? Here. McGinnis? Here. Slater?
Here.
Quorum present. This evening we are...
Mayor?
Yes?
I move to excuse Councilman Howard from the study section due to being out of the county.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Fleming and seconded by Councilwoman Beltramini that we excuse Councilman Howard for being out of the county. Discussion? The vote, Mrs. Bartholomew?
Mayor Shelley?
No.
Councilmember Beltramini?
Yes.
Fleming?
Yes.
Howard? Kerwin?
No.
McGinnis?
No.
Slater?
Yes.
Motion passes. This.
Motion failed.
No.
Motion failed.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I was going by the other numbers. Okay. For the clarity for the audience watching at home and here, some of us feel that we should just have either present or absent on attendance and that we don't need to excuse. And so that's, we've expressed that before, some of us. Okay, we're going to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2010-2011 annual budget and the 3-year budget. And tonight includes an overview of the budget, the general fund, the internal service funds, special revenue funds, and the debt service funds. So we all set, and then are we going to have clarification on some things that we talked about at our last meeting, if necessary?
If time permits, yes, and we'll stand ready to answer any questions that you have during this process.
Okay, and then we have another budget study session for next Monday evening,
Right.
same time, same place.
Yes, that essentially is the 3-year budget along with other items that you just mentioned.
All right, okay, thank you. So, Mr. Zerlake, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Mr. John Lamorato, the Assistant City Manager in charge of Finance, and I are going to present you with a balanced budget. And as a level of service document, that's the only positive thing I can say about this budget process. The document is prepared in accordance with your direction last fall to proceed with what was known as option 1, which places police, fire, and public works departments, known as public safety elements, with a priority over other departments. And I want now, if I may, have Mr. Lamorato do the presentation. We're both going to have parts of it, and again, we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, residents, and guests. Before I start, I'd like to thank Mary Redden and Beth Pashnick of the manager's office. They were really responsible for putting together and assembling this fine document we have here for your review tonight. A lot of hours into that, and I appreciate their great work on that. Tonight, basically, we'll start our budget review meetings. We have the overview, general fund, special revenue, internal service, and debt service funds. Next Monday, we'll cover the capital projects, enterprise funds, our 3-year budget, and wrap up. And then May 10th, we have the scheduled public hearing and adoption of the budget. Our budget is also based on outcomes, and our outcomes are intended to encompass the current style of the times as well as the future. City Council adopted wide-ranging outcomes and attempts to provide flexibility for changes that impact the budget. I would suggest we need to have a study session coming up here after the budget and so forth to review those outcomes A lot of things have changed since these were initially adopted a couple of years ago. So we'll need to take a closer look at those, and we'll spend some time on that, but the department directors are still based to use those outcomes and for their outputs and how they're gonna try to get things accomplished. The outcome statements is that Troy is to enhance the livability and safety of the community. Troy adds value to property through maintenance or upgrades to infrastructure and quality life venues. We can see, as we'll go through the budget document tonight and next week, that due to our current financial situation, the quality of life venues will be very difficult to maintain those. And also Troy's rebuilding for a healthy economy, reflecting the values of a unique community and changing an interconnected world. There we refer to the Big Beaver Corridor study, our transit center, and the Big Beaver Rochester Road gateway improvements. Outputs are the means by which the outcomes are put into action. Outputs were created for each outcome statement, and these outputs were rated and segmented into priority funding, intermediate funding, and basic priority funding. I'm not going to go over all those. Those are in the document. They're on pages 15 and 16 of the budget. And the department's performance objectives are still tied to these outputs and are referenced. A description of our budget. It's an operations guide, a financial plan, and a communication device that integrates the outcomes with resources and identifies budget policies. I want to stress that the budget is a financial plan. And for the first time, we prepared a proposed 3-year budget for review and approval. The budget also lays a framework to account for all our activities. This ties right into our financial software system, so every line item and every account is accounted for and reported to. The expenditure highlights. The overall budget is $141.3 million. That's down 5.5% from the current year's budget, or $8.2 million. Of those, the breakdown, the general fund budget is $57.8 million, a 6.9% reduction from the current year, or $4.2 million. The capital fund stayed roughly the same, was down about 1.4%. And all the other funds amount to $55.4 million, down 6% from the current year, or $3.5 million. So overall, the overall budget for all funds is down 5.5%. Some of the budget highlights for expenditures. Once again, a $4.3 million or 6.9% decrease in the general fund budget. We have $28 million slated for capital projects. Debt service fund includes funding for the voter-approved 1999 bond issues. And we account for all employees' wages and benefits that are tracked by each individual and by department and by benefit level. Really expanded upon this year with utilizing our New World financial software to really track it down to the penny for each employee. And you'll notice this year we normally round things. This year it's to the exact dollar in all areas. We also have an expanded capital fund area section of the budget, which provides some narratives on the projects themselves, maintenance cost, and operational cost savings by performing these projects. Option 1, this schematic, we'll call it, including cuts to police and fire, is what we based and used as a template to put together our budget, not only for this next year, but for the years 2 and 3. We tried as much as possible to follow this as closely as we could in putting this together. It did involve a second review of all these with departments to see if those positions could be eliminated, and some where there's some additional cuts, some there are not as many cuts in the first year. In this coming fall, when we have a verifiable taxable value number from Oakland County and our city assessor agrees with those numbers, then we will provide a new 5-year forecast to kind of schedule out what we think is going to happen to our taxable value. That will also We'll take a look at our second and third year of this budget to see if there needs to be any adjustments made to that. As you'll see over the next 2 weeks, it'll become more difficult to provide a balanced budget for years, going out years 4 and 5. Those would be years, fiscal years 2013-14 and 14-15. We have the personnel summary, which I'll turn over to the city manager, cover this section.
I'm not going to recite each position. I just want to go through each department. And please note that the 55 full-time positions is most likely going to be 61 full-time positions. The entire building department is privatized. As John mentioned earlier, option 1 is like a schematic, and the budget document becomes a specification. So we use that option as our guide, but when it comes down to putting pen to paper, we have to be more precise in that regard. In addition, what you'll see are some positions being slated for elimination that are in the public safety area. And when I get there, I'll explain further what we did there. But here we have personnel, 9, these are all full-time personnel, by the way. 9 in building inspection, 1 in building operations, 2 out of the assessor's department, 1 out of the attorney's office, 3 from engineering, 2 out of finance, fire staff technician, that is through attrition. Information technology and HR is 1 each. Library, 9 full-time positions, museum 1, parks and recreation 11. Police, you'll see 10 positions, and that means that we're essentially down 10 positions in fiscal year 10-11 compared to our current fiscal year. That's all through attrition. Real estate development is 1, and the streets department constitutes 2 positions. I want to mention that this in no way reflects the performance of any individuals. It used to be that when someone did a good job, they had a good job, and now we can't make that guarantee until we essentially go through every department and see if it should be privatized or regionalized or consolidated or eliminated. And when we do that, of course, we'll come to the city council for final authority. I believe, not to pick on city manager, but because I've been manager in other cities, I do believe that we have the most professional and efficient workforce around. And that becomes a negative point when we have a reduced revenue line, because once you are efficient and you've cut costs for a number of years, when your revenue line goes down, there's not too much else to cut.
Can you take a question? Councilman Curran, you have a question?
Sure.
I do. Question or
In
observation?
this area?
Okay.
Go ahead.
When this was shown in the book, the amount of money saved by this was around $4 million, the 55, around $4 million. And the observation is that the library's budget for this year was around $4 million. The 55 folks who will no longer have a job at the city, that's a one-time
That's right.
$4 million, not a cumulative. It would take 55 more, depending upon the position, 55 more, or an equivalence of that $4 million to see this go on. How many positions will remain after, we're still use 55, not 61 yet until we see that. How many will remain in the city after the 55?
After the 55, I think it's going to be 400? 388. 388. That, compared to our high point of about 2003-04, that represents a reduction of over 100 employees, and it's about 1 out of 5 people that will have been have our workforce reduced by when we're finished, unfortunately. it'll be about 36% of the full-time workforce. And most of the people that will be left at that point will be in the police department. In fact, one thing we'll look at seriously and consider, and that would be moving the balance of staff out of City Hall, because essentially the place is too big for us. Have the police department and fire department housed here, maybe leasing the rest and having us go somewhere else. Along the lines, too, I just wanted to provide a brief update that we still are engaging in employee concessions and continue to do that. And as labor contracts expire, we'll meet with the city council and explain what we're doing in terms of concessionary bargaining.
This is very great.
John? Good luck.
Yeah. In addition to the 55 full-time positions that are being reduced, we also have 46 part-time positions that are being laid off at this point through the various departments here. Looking at our full-time employees per 1,000 population, we're down to about 4.9 employees per 1,000 residents, and about 3.7 per 1,000 in our workforce, the people that actually come to work here. That's based on an estimated population of about 79,500, which was provided by SEMCOG as our latest census number that they've come up with. You notice the chart kind of goes up and down a little bit. We started using SEMCOG numbers in 2010, and with a big reduction this year, that's how it's reflected. In the past, our estimates were a little higher than SEMCOG's for the for the number of residents. In the last 2 years, we're using SEMCOG's numbers, a little more scientific approach to that. Once again, we reduced our full-time workforce by 104 positions from 7 years ago. And a benchmark that SEMCOG does put out for full-time per 1,000 equivalent, their benchmark is 5.7, and we're at 4.9. That was, their benchmark was derived from ICMA did a performance study for them, and so we are under the benchmark nationally for cities. Looking at some key trends and issues in the general fund, we'll start off looking at the revenue side. General fund overview, we have a reappropriation of fund balance of $2.4 million in this current year's budget. That leaves an unreserved, undesignated fund balance of around $9 million, or about 15% of our general fund budget. That was a directive from council. We were at around 17%. We have a range of 10 to 17%. We were at the high end of that range, and due to these difficult times, council has authorized us to take that down to 15%. So that still leaves around $9 million in reserves. 53 out of the 55 full-time employees eliminated through either attrition or layoffs are in the general fund. And it also includes transferring $300,000 from our budget stabilization fund. And that will, and council's agreed to that $300,000 for the next several years. We have, after this $300,000 reappropriation, we'll have $1.5 million left in that fund, the budget stabilization fund. Where the city gets its revenue, several sources, federal, state, and local returns make up about $5.4 million, for 9.3% of our general fund budget. That's down from $6.9 million in the current year, and that represented 11.2%. Fines and forfeitures, about $1.2 million, or 2.1%. That stays roughly the same from year to year. Licenses and permits, $1.1 million, or 1.9%. That's down from $1.6 million in the current year, which made up 2.5%. Property taxes, $32.6 million, or 56.4% of our budget, compared to $35.9 million in the current year. And that made up almost 58% of our budget. Interest and rents, about $1.2 million this year compared to $1.5 last year. Other revenue and finance sources, $9.2 million, or 15.9%, versus 7.1 or 11.5% last year. And the last category, charges for services, $7.2 million, over 12% versus $7.9 million last year. Once again, just a recap of that, you can see the percentage change from year to year. Taxes, the main thing was our property tax revenue that decreased. There's other items in there, penalties and interest on taxes, and we get a small amount from senior citizen housing and from mobile home parks, a very small amount. Federal and state, our building permits are down about $400,000 budget to budget. State share revenue is down $1.5 million from the current year budget. Charges for services were mainly down due to some police recovery costs that we were not able to put in place for various reasons. Interest income is down $300,000 current year. And operating transfers in, the change there is basically due to our utilization of $2.4 million in fund balance. In the current year's budget, we have no utilization of fund balance to balance the budget. Taking a look at the general revenue trends by source, you can see that taxes, federal, state, and local, license and permits, charges for services, and interest and rents are all have a decrease. And so 5 out of our 8 main sources of revenue have declined from the current year for a total of $6.3 million over all those. 3 of the 8 increased, reflecting about $2.1 million in increased revenue. This chart's a little busy, but this is our net taxable valuation that we have to use to finance the city of Troy. And after removing the Downtown Development Authority, the Brownfield, and the LDFA taxable values of about $151.6 million in taxable value, that leaves us our net taxable value to work with about $4.7 billion. And below here gives you the increases, or mainly decreases, for the last several years in what happened in real and personal property taxable values. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of red on this chart here, and for personal property, it goes back even beyond this chart. For the last 9 years, we've had a reduction in our personal property taxable value. With this chart, we have a net taxable value decrease from 2009 of $534 million in taxable value. Real taxable value went down 10.4%, personal 7.6%. The overall taxable value decrease from 2009 was $616 million, or 11.3%. You may recall during last several months we were projecting around a 12% reduction and came in at 11.3%. Personal property, once again, has decreased for the last 9 years, and our total 2010 taxable value is $4.8 billion. The net taxable value, you can see here this chart reflects the real and personal taxable value trend for the last 12 years. And you can see the top line there is our real taxable value. This is declining from 2008 was our high point there. We had $4.8 billion in taxable value in real property. 2010, we're down to $4.3 billion. And the personal property, the lower line there, is a smaller part of our whole taxable value. but it shows just a very gradual decrease going back to 2002. The taxable value as a percentage of assessed value. Back when they adopted Proposal A, before we had our assessed value, and that's what your taxes were based on, Proposal A developed a new value, your taxable value. That started back in 1994, but this chart goes to 1999 basically to show what has happened there with the taxable value versus the assessed value. 2010, our taxable value is equal to 97.1% of our assessed value, which means we have only a 2.9% of properties that are not at their assessed value or market value. What that really means is that any change now in the market value really has a dramatic effect on our taxable values, what happened this past year. Before, when you had a little gap between assessed and taxable value, you could have adjustments that even if your assessed value went down, if you had room between your taxable value, and that's based on the consumer price index, and that could increase a little bit. As assessed values increased from 1999 through 2005, the gap between taxable value and assessed value grew. Since 2006, when the decreases in assessed value started, that same gap has started to shrink, and right now, once again, we're right up there, about 97.1%. Our commercial and industrial properties only have about a 4.7% difference in their taxable value and assessed value. That's citywide. So once again, any change at all and projecting reductions in the overall assessed value has a direct impact now on our taxable value going forward here for the next several years. Total taxable value by class, looking at a 12-year trend again. Our residential taxable value went up to 58% from 57% current year, 1%. Commercial is at 30%, it's down 1%, and industrial stayed around the same at 12%. That's how we generate, those are the various factors, that's how we generate our property tax revenue based on those classes of property. Take another look at it, took a look at the assessed value or the market value of all those properties. And the residential property class makes up about 62% of our overall market value. Commercial, 28%, and industrial around 10%. Real estate taxes. These, the taxes for the other taxing jurisdictions are estimated at this point. Some are in the midst also of budget discussions, and some also have a December tax rate and levy for next year, so we won't know those till later on. But these are the current rates for those various taxing jurisdictions. I don't see a lot of movement in those. What this shows is our average Troy residential taxable value is at $102,490. That compares to $120,014 last year, or 14.6% reduction in our overall average residential taxable value. The average residential tax bill for city services, including the 0.12 mil increase that's in the proposed budget for the refuse fund, will still decrease $151 over the current year. Even with the 0.12 mils increase, the average residential property will still go down $151 for city taxes, from $1,114 to $963. All residential taxpayers will see a reduction in their taxes due to the negative consumer price index for next year. It was based on this past year of 0.997. It's a small amount, 0.3%. But unless you hadn't made any improvements to your home, you will see that if your taxable value is not equal to your assessed value, you will see a slight reduction in your taxable value. Everyone will for this next fiscal year. Real estate taxes by taxing jurisdictions. Once again, these percentages remain the same. The city receives 27 cents for each $1 you pay in property taxes. County and community college get 18 cents, and then local schools gets 55 cents. And we still remain the tax collection agency for all taxing jurisdictions. Okay. Here we have, we'll just take a closer look at Proposal A. And Proposal A, once again, limits the increase in taxable value to the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. And for 2010, we had a 0.997% reduction. Compared to the current year, we had a 4.4% increase in the taxable value. This illustration gives you examples of various valued homes and the effect of the city taxes for a home that has its taxable value still less than the assessed value. And the gold, it's a little hard to read there, the gold is for a home which the taxable value is equal to the assessed value. And we just really started running into that more based, going back a couple years ago, we really started running into that. And now this year we have like over 98% basically of the residential homes are going to be in that situation. What that shows you basically on the side, the first house was roughly in 2002 about $150,000 market value home. The second one was a $200,000 market value, and the last one's a $400,000 market value home in Troy. Going to the taxable value column there, you can see that we had, once again, the black numbers are for the home that the taxable value is still less than assessed value, so you had a slight reduction in the taxable value of that home, of that 0.3%. And that equated to city taxes of $857. That shows a $12 increase in that home. And that's basically the 1.12 mills that was necessary there with the refuse adjustment. Otherwise, that home would not have any increase at all. In the home if that home was at the taxable value was equal to the assessed value, you can see there was a big reduction from $80,581 to $71,709. Those property taxes went from $748 to $674, or they had a $74 reduction in their property taxes. Same thing holds true for the next house, which is a $200,000 home. Showing you what happens there. Basically, if your home was again under taxable value was under assessed value, you'd pay about $15 a year more in taxes. And if your taxable value is equal to your assessed value, you're saving about $89 a year in taxes because of the reduction in your taxable value this year. The last home shows about a $22 increase in taxable value if it's less than assessed value, and $197 reduction if those were equal. Summary of the millage requirements. We have a proposed millage rate in the budget of 9.40 mills compared to the current year of 9.28. Once again, the 0.12 increase is reflected in the refuse millage rate. This is the first overall rate increase since July 1, 1996 for the city 14 years ago. And in July 1996, our city tax rate was $9.38 per thousand. We're proposing $9.40 14 years ago. As far as the refuse rate, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the special revenue funds coming up, but I'll just talk a little bit now. In July 2007, the city decreased the refuse tax rate by 0.15 mills. And that was due to our new contract with Sacra and Tringali. That was negotiated a long-term contract and had some large savings in there. So City Council reduced that rate by 0.15 mills. We held that rate the same for the next fiscal year. And then in the current year, there was a need to increase the rate by 0.07 mills due to a slight reduction in taxable value and some increased cost. And instead of increasing the overall tax rate, the 0.07 mills was taken from the capital millage rate to keep the same tax rate, keep the same overall tax rate. Once again, the July 2010 rate is proposed to increase 0.12 mills due to the decrease in taxable value and some contractual cost increases. City real estate tax rates, once again looking at a 12-year history again. Basically through 2010, any increase at all was offset in a millage rate decrease in one of the other categories there. And we had an overall decrease the 1 year with the refuse reduction. This slide talks about the Headley rollback maximum authorized millage. In November 2008, the charter amendment reduced our general operating and capital authorized millage rate from 10 mils to 8.10 mils. Any future Headley amendment rollbacks will further reduce the 8.10 mils. We're not anticipating any, especially during a declining market, you're not going to have any Headley rollbacks. But when things do pick up, we could get into that situation again where we'd have to roll back from our 8.10 mils. We are currently levying 8.03 of the 8.10 mils, or 0.07 mils less, once again due to the increase in the refuse rate that was taken from the general operating capital. And with our current net taxable value, that 0.07 could generate about $328,000 in tax revenue. The refuse maximum tax rate is set by the state, and it also is affected by Headley, though, and that has reduced state. We have 3 mills according to the state. Over the years, the Headley has reduced that to 2.55 mills, and we are currently asking our proposed rate of 0.87. Still leaves us 1.68 mils in authorized millage there. So the 2010-11 city millage rates from some surrounding communities. We continue to have the lowest tax rate of any full-service city in this region of the state, and I would even probably say possibly statewide. The city of Sterling Heights, which is our closest millage rate comparison, has room within their authorized millage rate, and they are proposing, and council has the authority there to increase theirs by exactly the mills. We're looking at 1.90 mils, and they're planning to do that in this next year's budget. And on top of that, they're also going to be utilizing $3.4 million of their fund balance, in addition to the 1.9 million to balance next year's budget. That increase would put them up to 12.63 mils, and that put them 3.23 mils higher than the city of Troy. You have here is a comparison of city tax bills for a similar valued home in some of the surrounding cities. And this takes a look at that, and it's based on our average residential taxable value of $102,490. Our comparison is of similar valued homes in each of these communities, not the average residential taxable value in those communities. This gives you a true comparison of what the citizen pays in city taxes for a similar valued home if it were located in each of those communities, not with their average residential. This is looking at $102,490 taxable value home if it was located in any of those communities. Madison Heights is the highest. They're almost double our rate. They would pay $1,848, $885 more than the city of Troy resident for a similar valued home. Southfield, their city rate is $1,675 or $712 more in city taxes. Birmingham, $1,457 or $494 more. Rochester Hills, $1,307 or $344 more. Royal Oak, $1,198, $235 more. Farmington Hills, $1,190, $227 more. Sterling Heights, without at their current rate, $1,100 or $137 more. With their 1.90 mils addition, would be $331 more for the same value home in those communities. State shared revenue, one of our other larger sources of revenue, or used to be one of our larger sources of revenue. 2011, it's estimated at $5.1 million, down from the current year's budget of $6.6 million. And that was reduced due to the state's budget shortfalls they have. they've basically taken us down to our constitutional limit on what they have to give us to the city. But I'll talk a little bit more about that constitutional limit in a minute here. This revenue source makes up 8.8% of our general fund budget. In the current year, it's 10.6% this year. We are 3.2 million below the 2001 level, which is equivalent to 0.68 mils, which we've had to absorb within our budget without increasing the taxes. And sometimes, a lot of times, I think this goes unnoticed, and people are saying, what are you doing to reduce your this and that? Well, we've had this reduction in revenues of equal to 0.68 mils, which we've absorbed within our budget without increasing our rates. So the only way you could absorb it is by reducing expenditures and reducing your cost over those years. Since 2002, we've lost over almost $18 million in state shared revenue. We took our estimate down to, the state had projected around 5.6 million for next year for us. I know very well, as you're already hearing, the state's in trouble again with their budget, in deep trouble again. So they always, even though they say we're not going to touch it, they almost have to touch it. So we're taking it down, conservative approach, we're taking it down to $5.1 million. That's the current constitutional limit. I thought we were pretty safe there, but looking back, I went back several years to look at our state share revenue estimates and schedules, and back in 2005, 2006, our constitutional amount was $5.7 million. So even that is shrinking because it's all part of this formula. So we're down at 5.1. I'm not sure it's going to stay at 5.1, but that's what we have in our budget. So that has gone from 2006 to $5.7 million constitutional that they can't touch to 5.1 in 2010. So I have a little concern about that and how they come up in their calculations and what that new constitutional amount might be, but we're budgeting at that amount for next year. General fund income, investment income is not a pretty picture either. Tied to interest rates, and you know what interest rates are paying out there, and we are fairly restricted in what we can invest in, and we're looking at the safety of the city's funds also, so we're not going to we can't get into stocks and things like that anyways. But basically, you have governmental agencies and so forth which are paying almost nothing or zero just about. You have some guaranteed accounts that are paying 0.25%, 0.3%. You could see at one point back in 2000 when rates were quite a bit higher, and roughly, probably close to the same fund balance numbers or so. That was, I look at it as free money. We had $2.5 million in investment income. This next year's budget, we're at $300,000. So that, you see a lot of the wide swings going on where any interest rate adjustment does help. That's why it is also important to have some fund balance in reserve so we could earn some additional earnings on those funds. Speaking of fund balance, we're projecting at June 30, 2010 a general fund balance, total fund balance of $22.2 million. That includes reserved and unreserved funds. That's the cumulative result of excess revenues over expenditures from day one of the city. That's a rolling number that goes forward each year. At the end of the year when it's audited, if your revenues are more than your expenditures in the general fund, you increase your fund balance. If your expenditures are more than your revenues, you decrease your fund balance. So this goes back from day one of the city. But right now we're at about $22.2 million. Since 1997, we have doubled our fund balance. We are projecting for the current year of revenue coming in about $900,000 over expenditures. That's why you can see a slight increase there in our overall fund balance. So without using any fund balance this current year, we're projecting our revenues to coming in $900,000 over expenditures. General fund unreserved, undesignated fund balance. This is our money that's not allocated or reserved for any purpose. It's roughly about $9 million or 15% of our budget. We're estimating once again at around 9 million, 15%, and that's after a reappropriation of $2.4 million for the 2010-11 budget. This keeps us within the policy directive of 10 to 17%, and our current directive of maintaining 15% during these difficult times. Just a real quick fund balance recap. Utilization amount applied to revenues in the current year's budget, or the proposed budget, is $2.4 million compared to $0 in the current year. Unreserved, undesignated fund balance range is 10 to 17%. We're at 15%, or $9 million. Kind of covers the general fund revenues. Are there any questions on the revenue side of the general fund?
Just could you explain again, John, what you gave us last Monday about revenues being down $2 million from the projected in 2009, 6 months ago?
Well, $1.5 million of that are state shared revenues, basically, and there are some other interest income that's come down a little bit from that point.
Right.
So that makes up the majority of that reduction.
But the total number that was projected 6 months ago in revenues will be down $2 million additionally in just a
Right.
6 month period because of decline of monies coming in. I think the important people don't know that. That's in addition to what we're already projecting. Okay. Council, do you have questions at this point? Mr. Amarato and Mr. Zerman on these points? Do you wish to take a break at this point, or do you want to go into the next section?
Do you have, how about it? But,
I saw that there.
we could do that, or where are we? We could probably cover the rest of the general fund and be by around 9 o'clock, and
Right.
we could probably take a
That,
break.
that's usually our time frame.
All right.
Of course, anybody who needs to dash out can.
All right, rolling right along.
Okay.
Okay, the general fund expenditures. The budget document provides many schedules at various levels of detail. You can get from summaries by department, summaries by the general fund, summaries by categories of the general fund, and summaries by account. It does provide detail and some history on each of those various schedules. Looking at the general fund budget history, since 2007, 2008, we've been ratcheting down the general fund budget. The 2010-11 budget is approximately the same level as 2003-04 budget. Once again, the 2010 is 6.9% less than the current year's budget. The 2009-10 was 3.7% less than the 2008-9 budget. The only upswing there you could see in 2006-07 was one of the larger budgets that we've had, but that did include $3.5 million that we had in fund balance that we wanted to allocate to our retiree health care plan and up to the budget stabilization fund that year. So that increased that budget a little bit more than what was normal during those years. How we allocate our funds. The general fund is basically $57.8 million. Equates to $727 per resident that we spend based on our population estimate of 79,481. This chart just shows department budget and the dollar amount per department per resident. As you can see from the chart, roughly 63% of the general fund budget is dedicated to providing public safety to our residents, which includes police, fire, and public works expenditures. Some other expenditure highlights. The expenditures do reflect the city's priorities. General fund operating budget is down 6.9%. There are no wage increases for any employee groups, with the exception of the TCOA group, which has a contract in existence. All other employee groups, there's no wage increase in the 2009-10 budget, or 10-11 budget. And also the employees in the classified exempt AFSCME and Troy Fire staff group. The budget includes a 5% wage concession in the form of furlough days. It also includes the required funding for our other post-employment benefits, and those are funded within the budget. There's a reduction, once again, of 55 full-time positions. A couple other highlights that in reviewing this I wanted to add is that the budget also calls for the elimination of the real estate development and community affairs department. There will be some absorption of some of those functions in the city manager's office, in engineering, and the police department budgets are absorbing some of those costs. But those two departments have been eliminated and are no longer shown on our organization chart. It does also include reduced hours of operation for the museum, the nature center, and the library. And as far as the building inspection department, still at the time of the budget was assembled, we were in the midst of reviewing the privatization of the building department. We've gone to city council. We're working on a contract to privatize that operation. If the city council approves the contract for this service, it will free up approximately $200,000 in the general fund budget compared to what we have budgeted now versus going privatization will save an additional $200,000. General fund expenditures by object. We have all three expenditure object groups, being personal services, supplies, other service and charges, have declined since 2008, 2009, in each of those 3 years. Personal services include wages and fringe benefits. They've declined from $45.3 million in 2008-9 to $40.9 million in 2010-11, or $4.4 million. Supplies have declined from $3.1 million 2008-9 to $2.5 million, 2010-11, a 0.6 million decrease. Other service and charges have declined from $16.1 million 2008-9 to $14.4 million, 2010-11, or $1.7 million reduction. So the city has been making steps and has been reducing our costs over the last 3 years and continues to look at ways to save funds. General fund expenditures by object. Overall, once again, the total general fund is down $4.3 million, or 6.9%. Personal services in the current year budget is 2.9% reduction, 2.9 million reduction, or 6.6%. Supplies $226,000, 8.3%. And other service and charges $1.1 million, or 7.2%. A breakdown of the personal services shows that wages from year to year have decreased $3.6 million for wages for employees. Hospitalization costs have gone down about $94,000 in the general fund. The retirement fund required contribution has gone up $910,000. Workers' comp and unemployment has gone up $155,000. And part of the personal services election inspection wages have gone up about $35,000 over the current year's budget because of the state election and so forth coming up next year. Our defined benefit employer contribution is based on an estimate provided by our actuaries. Each year we have an actuarial study done of our defined benefit plan. And those numbers, whatever our required contribution is, we make that contribution and we have to fund it, so we fund it. We don't want to push it off on the future taxpayer, so we fund it. Our current year right now is based on an estimate that was provided last year by our actuaries. They schedule out for us, when we're looking at a 5-year budget, they schedule out the next 5 years. What we have is we'll be receiving, probably in June, our actuarial report, and that will give us our actual percentage of payroll that we need to fund. That may be higher or lower than what we have right now as an estimate. That's what it's based on. Right now we're basing our estimate from what the actuaries presented to us in June, basically, last year. We'll have our new numbers, and that comes, and then we revise, and we internally, if it means that if it goes up a little, that means departments have to make up those funds within their budget. If it goes down, that means it frees up some funds, and that will be all part of our whole rolling, 3-year look at budgets and going forward. I just wanted to point out that last week, I think there was a couple comments made. I didn't have a chance to address those regarding the pension fund and so forth. And as far as our investment performance, I know for a fact that we've outperformed many municipal plans that pay millions of dollars for professional management. Our plan for 2009 earned 25%, and that is made up of, you could say, well, that's not, stocks went up more than that, this and that, but we can't have all stocks and whatever. So it's a makeup of roughly 65% in equities, 30% in fixed income, and about 5% in cash. Earned 25%. I do know personally of a lot of cities who pay millions of dollars who did not come anywhere near that 25% return. So I think the pension plan is in good hands. It's 102% funded at this point, and a lot of cities are very envious of that funded position. General fund expenditures by object. Once again, personal services makes up the largest part of our budget. About 71% of our general fund is for personal services. That's wages and fringe benefits. 4% for supplies and 25% for other service and charges. This allocation remains the same as the current year's budget. We have 6 union groups, and of our 388 remaining employees, full-time employees, about 134 or so are classified exempt or non-union. We are in current negotiations with the MAP group and the TCSA group, which is a newly formed union for communication supervisors. And once again, we are in a concessionary budget negotiation mode with all groups. General fund supplies, down $227,000 roughly, or 8.3% from the current year. The postage went down about $13,000, operating supplies $173,000, repair and maintenance supplies about $29,000. Postage, as a result of when you look at overall various departments, fewer items are being mailed. We're relying more on electronic function of emailing or faxes and so forth for that purpose, wherever we can do that. That saved us quite a bit. And also the reduced costs in mailing out our Troy Today from a lighter weight paper and a reduced number of pages. That has also saved some of the postage. Operating supplies, $173,000. That's reductions in parks and recreation, museum, building inspection, and fire operations. Had some one-time purchases there that for items that can't be classified as a capital item, but were fairly expensive last year. That was a one-time purchase, so that's out of the budget for this year. We have repair and maintenance supplies is down about $28,000, basically from the library, museum, and some salt purchases that were reduced. Other service and charges went down $1.1 million or 7.2%. Computer services went down $224,000, contractual $452,000, health services $60,000, public utilities $150,000, and rentals $366,000. Touching on computer services went down. We have a reduction of 64 computers through the fewer employees and for some consolidation of various departments. Reductions were down 64 actual workstations or computers. Those are all based, there's a charge per computer, so that's the main reason for that reduction. Contractual services and parks and recreation, there's reduced costs for street island maintenance. We're cutting down on cut watering, cut fertilization, cut back on a lot of the services of the street island maintenance. We also have our community groups funding as part of the contractual service, which we took half of that funding out this year. Custodial charges, we had a reduction in the custodial contract rate, and also a reduction in equipment maintenance. Health services, we have a reduction in physical examinations, some through negotiations and so forth. And those are also on a by-year type thing, but we've reduced a lot of costs in that area. And also, we're not having a lot of new employees coming on board, so there's no entry physicals and so forth either. Public utilities, mainly as a result of energy-saving measures. We had a new HVAC system in the city hall, which is saving a tremendous amount of money here, brought up our original equipment that was replaced last year into this current year's budget. And also reduction of hours at the museum, nature center, the library, also resulted in some reduction in public utility cost. Rentals, there's a reduction in vehicle and equipment rental charges due to, once again, to the reduction in employees and some of the efforts that are now being privatized and so forth. So there is a reduction in those charges. Community group contributions. Option 1 called for the entire funding of these contributions to be eliminated in the 2010-11 budget, with the exception of Troy Medigo, which does receive pass-through funds from smart buses. Now, the smart millage doesn't pass, whatever that will have some effect on the whole Medigo system. But basically, this is one of the changes we had from option 1, is that we basically wanted to give these groups a little additional time to try to fund some additional funding, and we reduced it by half instead of the full amount for 2010-11. 2011-12, that funding is eliminated for all these groups, with the exception of Troy Medical again at this point. So that's where you see basically roughly half. We broke it down into there. The real small ones we left because there wasn't much there in the first place, but all those, with the exception of Troy Medical, will be eliminated in the 2011-12 budget. Yes.
Councilman Kerwin, questions?
I do. I know that we usually do Avondale Youth Assistance as well. I didn't know whether that was. It is. It's included there, both youth assistants. That's all. I just need clarification.
Okay. The Recreation Division Challenge, there was a city council directive back in 2002 that established a subsidy of $1,705,000 plus the existing community center subsidy of $1 million. So we had a $2.7 million subsidy that we're saying that their operations cannot draw more on the city, overall city funds over the 2.7. I hate the word subsidy is kind of not a good word to use a lot of times. They're saying, well, you're giving them that money. Well, no, we're kind of saying that you have to operate within these means here, and you can't go above that amount there. And you can see over the years, they've done well. They haven't, they've come close one year back in 2009, but the current year they're looking at around $700,000 still to the good overall for the total Parks and Rec. In 2010-11 budget, about $1.4 million in savings. The increase in savings is a result of the reduction in some Parks and Recreation administrative staff, community center, nature center operations, without having a major drag or negative effect on the revenues at this point. We try to look at areas where we could reduce and make some cuts that didn't. We'd still be able to generate revenues and some increase in fees and so forth in there. The community center challenge was $1 million. They said we cannot, your operations cannot exceed more than $1 million of what the revenue that you generate and so forth. That was established when they went from a 23,000 square foot building, which used to be the old, where the court now is, to their new facility of 127,000 square feet. Council wanted them to keep the same amount of money that they were providing even when it went to the new facility. So all expenses related to that new facility They had to have revenues basically to offset those, so they would not be over the $1 million. And they've done an excellent job there and not really coming close to needing anywhere near that subsidy. And 2010-11, with some cuts in those areas, they're about around $100,000 or so they need of the $1 million. Okay, that does complete general fund. Any questions on the general fund?
On the general fund? Representative Klein?
Yeah. Well, good. Just going back to the pension fund, just so I understand. In the past, I'm looking at slide 47, your discussion on slide 47 on page 24. If I'm understanding correctly, we're paying in about $910,000 in next year's budget plan to subsidize or make whole those employees who are on the defined benefit plan prior to us going to the defined contribution plan.
That's the city's contribution for the DC, employer contribution for the DC, DB, and for the health care piece of it.
So the $910,000 has nothing to do with just the pension for the defined benefit. It's all contributions.
All pension contributions.
All pension.
Now, all the DC pensions have basically stayed the same,
Right.
because there's no increase in pay, and the percentage, whatever the city has as employers, there's no increase in that from year to year for the DC. So most of it is attributable to the DB. And also there's some of the retiree health cares in that 910.
But most of it is defined benefit pension.
Right. Which we have, right, 70% of our employees, the number is going to be going up, 70% of our employees are in the DC plan, the defined contribution plan, roughly 30% are left in the DB plan. And with retirements that continuously go on, that number, it's going to, a lot of cities are probably not even the opposite of 30% in the DC and 70% still in DB, where we've made this change going back to 1997, we started the DC plan.
Certainly, that's moving in the right direction. But there were many years we didn't have to put any money in this pension plan because of the investment income, the revenues we were getting. It was so great. But in this environment, we can't anticipate that, and rightfully so, I think. That's why, how long has it been, Mr. Lamorato, since we have made contributions specifically to the pension defined benefit?
Well, last several years we have, but there's probably maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago or so that there was, because of our overfunded position,
right,
there was not a pension contribution required for the DB plan. But that does go, it fluctuates with, we have a closed plan now, and there have not been, I can tell you there have not been any pension improvements in the DB
right.
pension for a number of years.
Councilor Curley?
Still on that topic, there was a suggestion by a citizen comment that one would just pour some of that money back into the general fund as if it could be moved like that. The commitment, I understand, I want this on the record, the commitment to fully fund that is something that has been ongoing with the city, isn't that true?
We want
you
to,
said you're just
if
now,
you don't,
please.
excuse me, if you, the system that we use takes, we call it a 5-year blended smoothing of the either losses or gains each year. So we take, last year we had 2008, which is not a good year for anybody in the stock market and the investment market. So those losses are taken over, 20% of those are taken over the next 5 years going forward. This past year we had a very good rate. So those are going to offset one of those bad years. That we're, like last year, we have to take 20%, but we can only take 20% of our good year, and that goes forward. So it does help in the future. That 25% gain in investments is going to help down the road more so than it is now, because we still have some of the early 2000 numbers or middle 2000 numbers, which there are some rough times there too in the stock market. So it's kind of all even out. So we don't take, if we were to take, we have major swings in our contribution rate if we were to take like a total loss for 1 year, all in 1 year. Or then you have a swing the other way if you have a total gain in 1 year. This way, a lot of cities use a smoothing, 5-year smoothing of that out, so you kind of even it out over 5 years. And that's basically what we use. And we fund it. We have to fund it, otherwise you're going to put it on the backs of citizens down the road here. There won't be any employees left in the DB plan to contribute, which they contribute to it. And the city would make the full contribution if you weren't contributing now on an ongoing basis. So we want to, it's designed to pay, the current people pay for the current retirement benefits that are being earned and not put it on a future residents.
Unlike some state governments that rob Peter to pay Paul, it takes some money out of that and then deplete the system altogether. I also wanted to mention the chair of that committee, of the pension committee, who actually is a professional and has quite a bit of skill and has served well as a volunteer. So there's been a great savings for that professional bit of knowledge that comes with your chair.
That's true.
Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes, ma'am. On slide number 54 on page 27, I'm really pleased to see how close we are to a break even on the community center. Last year we had expenditures exceeding revenues of about $435,000. Next year's budget we're projected at $95,614 expenditures exceeding revenues. That is so close to a break even, I believe we could do something to tweak it. I would love to see that a break even. This means there's really no need to even consider closing the community center based on the projections here. If anything, we might be able to do things to make that a break even within $95,000 of a $2,137,000 budget. So, community center, there's been discussions about closing that or mothballing that. I think that's, in my opinion, is off the table here. But we need to probably tweak it a bit more, my suggestion, and make that a break even or maybe even a small profit, because I know it's really something that's really utilized by a lot of citizens. So it's a good job for getting this far. I think we've got a little more work to do.
And I think Carol Anderson and her group has been basically charged with that to get those expenditures and revenues in line for the next year. So they have basically a year to get things in place. So they take a look at it the following year, and if they can meet their revenue, that's up to council, they can meet their expenditures and equal revenues and so forth, and there's no subsidy at all, then there would not be a reason to eliminate that.
And the same is true with the museum. You know,
Right.
Lorraine has the,
Right.
trying to make that a break-even proposition as well.
Absolutely.
All along, we've said that if we operated the way that we have in the past, these venues would close.
Right.
We're always trying to find a way in the quality of life venues to at least break even,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to do so.
Doesn't that break even though depend on the fee schedule? If the fee schedule is raised, if you have enough people paying those increased fees, it may cover those costs. But last time we increased fees at the community center, we had groups complain and individuals complain and take their use of that building elsewhere. So we still have to see those numbers, don't we, about how many
yes,
people
we're going to
have
work.
to
We're working on it, and there'll also probably be some other proposals to generate some additional revenue coming up to council shortly too, after we review the city manager, and we're looking at ways to try to make it a break even or positive.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
just,
Councilman Sherman?
just one more point, it also reflects layoffs.
Right.
So as we go forward again, how that goes out from year to year to year will make a difference too. And we have to be cognizant.
Next year, included in next year's budget, there are major, well, in 11-12, there's no community center. So basically, there are major reductions in there, and we'll be looking at a lot of things to what programs pay for themselves, which will there will be, I'm sure, some reductions in programs. And we're looking at ways to generate some additional revenue through hall rental usage and so forth and different things too. But they're basically tasked with that next year to try to come up with a way that they could break even.
Right. Councilman Beltrame?
You just scared me a little bit. If venues such as the community center find a way to break even, you've said that you have taken them out of next year's budget and in essence balanced without them. So you've taken whatever would have gone.
The revenues basically meet the expenditures, so both sides
So
are
it
up.
ought
The
to be
revenues,
okay.
revenues and the expenditures or of the 11-12 budget next year.
So if they broke even this year and proved an ability to do that, they could continue next year.
And that would be our rolling, once again, our rolling budget that if we adopt and the council adopts this 3-year budget plan, right now it's called to be eliminated in 11-12. If they could meet the revenues, we'll put the revenues back in and the expenditures back into.
No, I have to agree with Wade. I think at $1.12 a citizen, it's worth keeping it open, so.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, and the other good news, if we keep that open, budget year 12, 13 going forward, that saves the jobs because they're paying for themselves. So we have to find a way to keep that, cost neutral or maybe a profit, and then we're not eliminating jobs. And that's what we're about. So I think we're very close to doing that. A little work to do, but it's manageable. Good job.
Any other questions on this section? Council, we're going to take a break now. It is about 13 minutes to 9, so we'll come back just before 9.
That much.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna begin. Folks, break's over. Okay. Mr. Lamorato, we're going to the special revenue funds.
Yes.
Okay.
The next type of fund group we're going to look at are special revenue funds of the city. The special revenue funds, they account for specific revenues that are legally restricted to expenditures for particular purposes. And here we have the various funds of block grant, community fair, local street, major street, budget stabilization, refuse and recycling. The Community Development Block Grant Fund, 2011, the revenues total $260,600. It's made up of $168,000 roughly of 2010, our new federal award, and then we just reprogrammed $92,640 to come up with the $260,600. City Council already, after a public hearing and so forth, have allocated these funds accordingly to the home chore program, a little amount from administration, Section 36 storm sewer, and Section 36 park. Community fair fund was in the initial proposed budget, and City Council has since decided to suspend the fair indefinitely, so that will be removed from the budget. Local street fund, we're spending approximately $1.7 million to maintain our local streets. We get this revenue from the state of Michigan. It's from the gas and weight taxes and license fees. We get a portion of that to help fund the maintenance cost of all our local streets. It's based on a formula of number of miles and our population. Since we're talking about population, a lot of times it's very important too for everybody, for the census and everybody to get the right count in there, because state shared revenues, our street money, a lot of things are based on the population, so we need all residents to please fill out your census form and get that in. We're stuck with that number for the next 10 years for all our financing. So it comes into a lot of grants, a lot of things for the city, so we need to make sure everybody fills that out and gets it back in. Okay, this revenue source has decreased since 2003-04. The local street revenue from the state of Michigan no longer covers our maintenance, snow removal, sweeping, those costs. It no longer covers that. We need to transfer money from our major street funds and reappropriate some of their fund balance to cover the total cost. Because we have about $1.7 million. You can see we have roughly about $1.3 million in revenue. And the cost of about $1.7 to perform that. And it's up again, we have about 265 miles of local roads in the city. And as long as the gas tax is a set amount per gallon, it doesn't go, not reflected in the price of gas, but or it doesn't move with the price of gas. It's a set amount per gallon. As long as that's a set amount per gallon, the more fuel efficient cars, with the price of gasoline, with the employment conditions and so forth, people cutting back on driving and purchasing gas, that's why we've had a reduction in that state share, in that source of revenue from the state of Michigan. And it's been up, I think, again, it's always up for discussion with the state and how they want to try to address those needs. There needs to be a different formula to pay for that, for road maintenance. Otherwise, we're not going to even have enough money to maintain our current roads for snow removal and minor repairs and signage and things like that. Major Street Fund, spent about $1.9 million on major streets to maintain for snow removal. And then we also, to cover, we transfer $332,000 to the local street fund to help for the repairs and maintenance of the local streets. And each year, we try to put $1 million into the capital projects fund to go towards our major street road improvements. Those have to be used for major roads. They can't be used for local roads. It's also funded by the gas and weight tax and license fees. And we have roughly about 57 miles of what are considered major streets in the city. This chart here takes a look at what's really going on with our state funding. We call it Act 51 revenue for major and local roads. The top line is for major, the bottom is for local roads since 2001. You can see back in 2004, we received about $3.8 million a year for major roads. In the current year's budget, we're down to $3.2 million, so $600,000 reduction. And local roads is a smaller number, 1.5, but that's gone in 2004. That's gone down to $1.3 million in the current year's budget, or proposed budget. So once again, another source of revenue from the state that's declining. Our budget stabilization fund was established in 2003. We had some excess funds in our fund balance, and council decided to start funding this budget stabilization fund. We put some money in there. It did have $2.1 million at one point. We're using $300,000 in the current year, $300,000 next year. So we'll be down to about $1.5 million. It was designed to get us through some difficult budget times, and we are utilizing a portion of that and plan on using $300,000 for the next 3 or 4 years, basically until it's probably exhausted, unless things turn around before then. The interest earnings, which again are not much, but those are also transferred to the general fund at the end of each year. Refuse and recycling fund. This tax rate was reduced in 2008 by 0.15 mils from 0.83 to 0.68. Once again, in 2009-10, we had to add 0.07 mils by reducing our capital millage rate by 0.07. That was because of a drop in taxable value and increased cost. Due to the further reduction in our taxable value, more significantly this for next year, and some increased costs and contractual costs for disposal and removal, there's a need to increase that millage rate by 0.12 mils to 0.87 mils. The average residential homeowner will pay $89 a year for refuse collection. That's for refuse and recycling collection. And it's actually, even with the 0.12 mils, it's $1 less than the current year. This current year, the average residential is paying $90 a year. So even with the 0.12 mils, the average residential homeowner is paying $1 less per year. The overall budget for the refuse and recycling fund has gone up 0.8% in the current year's budget. The major factor is a major reduction in revenue, taxable value. That's made up by adding the 0.12 mils into that. Take a look at the fund balance of the refuse and recycling fund. June 30, 2009, we had roughly $190,000 left in that fund. Current year's operations will take that down to about $112,000. We had planned on and reappropriated a portion of fund balance in the current year's budget to cover, in addition to the 0.07 mils, to cover that shortfall. With the 0.12 increase, that will now, revenues will equal expenditures. There's no reappropriation of fund balance. We're down to about $112,000. That's all we have left. That's the only revenue source for this fund is from the taxes that are generated, and a very small amount from the selling of the recycling bins and so forth, which is a minor amount. But they have to operate by the property taxes levied for that operation, and those taxes have to be used for the refuse and recycling. The 0.12 mils is equal to about $563,000. That's what we need in additional funds there to cover that. Looking at the refuse millage rate history, 2010-11, the rate is approximately the same rate as charged back in 1999-2000, or 11 years ago. At one point we were, in 95, 96, we were almost up to $1.20. That's gone down now, and we're at proposing at 87 cents for the 2010-11 budget. And looking at the average residential refuse property taxes paid, even with, again, the 0.12 mil increase, the average residential taxpayer will see a decrease of $1 from 90 to 89 for refuse collection recycling. You really think about it, it's quite a bargain for $90 a year for refuse and recycling picked up. A lot of cities are, it's a lot more than that, and those cities that do not have city-operated or city-controlled refuse, what it would cost for privately contracting to pick up a refuse could be $300 or $400 a month. I think it is those costs. So I think it's a very good deal here. We're able to spread that on our total taxable value. That covers the special revenue funds.
I did, and only because we're not going to go into it in any more detail than those slides, is that correct?
Right.
So I want to refer to just a couple things in the book, and this would be on page 220, right? And number one, I hear nothing but praise for Tringali that does pick up, and again for our composting for picking up that. On page 223, in your service statement, you talk about the collected yard waste is delivered to a compost site and processed, and then it makes reference to having that available at the Public Works facility for free. Are we still doing that?
Jim Richard?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Some of the hours have changed due to staffing that's available so that we can secure the location, but it is available on currently 7:30 till 6:30 at the Public Works building Monday through Friday, and then there's some hours once Parks and Recreation has folks there that can open and close the gates.
That's a really great service, and I know that people now have been cleaning up their yards, are grateful that that comes and picks up, and it's nice to know that those are going and becomes recycled again. I also wanted to talk to you about specific recycling, and this is on page 220. Councilmember Beltramini before has spoken from the table in terms of how if each residence, if each household recycled to a greater extent, we would be making some money that would be helpful. Currently, are we?
Nope. For the resell of the collectibles, recycling?
Recycling.
The SACRA sells the product for us as it does for all the communities, and they are constantly looking at different markets for those, and over the last 3 months there's been a considerable increase in our revenues based on a little bit of the recession leveling out, and so they're always looking at new markets, but currently we've had some substantial increases over the declines from the last 2 years. So yes, those funds are increasing to us, but as John had mentioned, they are not substantial to what our costs are.
Tim, what are our rates right now to dump in a landfill garbage? How much a ton? Roughly.
Roughly, I think it's $55 a ton.
Okay. So regardless of the marketability of our recyclables, every ton that goes to recycling saves us $55. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a verted cost.
Right. Okay.
So as folks have talked about creative ways to do things, this is clearly a creative way that every single person could do simply by sorting out in which container one puts things at the curb.
Councilman Beltrame?
Well, and for Mr. Richneck, it seems to me that SACRA does from time to time audit what goes in the landfill, so to speak, and I think the last statistic I read was 30% of what went into the landfill could have been recycled under SACRA regulations.
Yes, they do a curbside study periodically of a few streets in each community. It's probably less than 1% of the population, but that's very close to accurate.
So, that's huge.
Mayor, Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes. That same subject, on slide 64, if we're paying $55 a ton now, roughly, it's a small number, but we're going up about $30,000 in next year's budget. Is that because we anticipate having more garbage to dispose, or is the fee going up per ton?
There is a fuel escalator portion of the contract, and price, because last year, 2 years ago, when the prices were way up there, we were hit with a higher surcharge on that. Last year it came down. This year, gas prices going back up again. So once a year, they go through and they annually adjust, and that's why we have about a 3.7% overall increase in their rates.
Mm-hmm.
But because of less disposable material and so forth, because of the economy, there is less tonnage and so forth. We're only looking at an overall 0.8% increase in the actual cost for all the contractual, for the whole operation, 0.8% increase.
We're still spending $1,031,000 for disposals, and
Right.
your points, if we could recycle, that could save
Sure.
a lot of money. But we're still paying a flat $2,300,000 for a collection contract. Is that irrespective of how much they pick up or whatever?
Well, it's per stop, I believe.
Per
and it's also
stop.
the whole really only difference in there, if it's a set contract amount, I think there's a cost of living adjustment, which is not a lot now, but it's the fuel adjustment, and it's kind of the thing that could really cause that to go up or down.
Yeah, that really stayed flat, which
Right.
I was hoping would go down, because
Yeah.
this economy, maybe you're generating less garbage. That's what
Well,
I
we
read
had less,
anyway. Maybe I'm
less
wrong.
garbage, but the fuel did go up. It is going up, and so it was like a 3.7 increase. But the reduction in the disposal and so forth cost kind of offset most of that. We only had a 0.8% increase overall.
So when we're looking at these disposal fees and so forth, this is a net number?
Yes.
Okay, always net. We've got, okay.
Councilwoman Kerwin?
And
Any
then,
other question?
yes, will we receive replacement pages for 214 and 216 now that the community fair?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, and when we do talk about capital projects, there needs to be.
Oh, yeah, there might be a few changes.
Right, yeah. Okay,
Mayor,
yes, Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
on this Troy Days, I know we voted as a council, it's done this year. Boy, I'd like to see something come back next year, you know. I don't know how to protect for that in the budget, but my goodness, if we can do something next year to help bring back some form of Troy Days, maybe it'd be downsized or whatever, I'd love to see that. And I think maybe we can talk about that when we're approving the final budget, or maybe we talk about it now, but I don't know, it looks like, what was it, $182,000 expenditures. I don't know how those numbers are generated. That was what was projected it cost the city. I don't know what the details are for that, just because this is very summary here. But I would hope we could do Troy Days for a lot less than $182,000 when you net that against the revenue that you'd have coming in from Troy Days. That just seems like a very large number to me.
Well, the main problem is that we no longer have the staffing out there in public works or parks. With the reduction in staffing, that's the main reason, and police. That's the main reason why we don't have the time in it. It's just not a 4-day festival. It's weeks before and afterwards and so forth for the setting up and cleaning and maintenance, and there's a lot of hours that go into it, which we don't have the staffing for. That's the main reason why.
Councilman Beltrame?
Wade, I'd like to see it come back too, but again, I think it sends the wrong signal if we
Right.
celebrate while we're laying people off. I can't bring myself to do that. I mean, I understand how it's a community builder, but people are gonna have to build at the community center and at the parks. I can't do that.
And if I may,
Councilman Kerwin? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, just recently, council member Fleming mentioned jobs, that's what we're all about, and
Right.
$180,000 represents jobs. And these are people who can make a living rather than celebrate 4 days. So that's really how I look at it. It's that cut and dry. We can't, if we can maintain that, then that's helpful. We're looking at a lot of serious issues before us, none of them pleasant. But the one thing that the committee suggested to us through their resolution when they spoke before us is that they fully understood that now is not the time to concentrate on troy days. Now is the time to right this ship. And I agree.
Madam Fleming?
And I agree. If we were to resurrect it, it would have to be cost neutral. If you actually look at this community fair fund, that's, it shows it's cost neutral. You got $182,000 in revenue, $182,000 in expenses. So it's,
Except for the bottoms.
yeah, except for the bottom. And I don't know how those charges are generated, or expenditures are generated. But anyway, that.
Right, and the other factor involved there is that some years, especially years where there's been bad weather, bad attendance, that they've been in negative figures. And so that has to be in account too. I
don't think it's, I think it's shown in the budget because it has to balance, but
Right.
I don't think it's a cost neutral
I know.
endeavor.
Right, I don't think it is either. I don't think it has been. Anyway, so, but I think we've dealt with that for this year. Let's go to the next fund.
Over the next set of funds are classified as internal service funds. They're used to account for the financing of goods and services provided by one department to other departments on a cost reimbursement basis. And we have all the various funds listed there we'll touch on briefly. Building Operations Fund provides building maintenance services to all city buildings. The department expenditures are incurred and charged on a square footage basis. The Building Operations Department services approximately 568,000 square feet of facilities, and it's roughly at a cost of approximately $2.43 per square foot. They do have a reduction of one full-time building operations specialist and one part-time office assistant included in this budget. And this department could face further, all the internal service funds could face further reductions as we go through the 2 and 3 year budget based on if we don't have buildings that we're not going to, we don't, or they're closed or not used as much and so forth. There will be reductions in this area in the future. Information Technology Fund. The revenues are generated by charges to departments based on the number of computers assigned to their department. They service about 481 computers throughout the city, 64, once again, fewer than the current year. The charges per computer covers support, training, replacement of those computers, and any upgrades in software and so forth. They have a reduction of one full-time application support specialist and one part-time application support specialist. Once again, as we move forward and we look at the 2 and 3 year budget out, there's further some other reductions in that area. We don't have, we're eliminating more and more computers and so forth. Basically in the support area. They have funds in their budget for the exchange upgrade, which is mainly some hardware purchases and servers and so forth for that. It's for the whole city, $71,000 in capital improvements. But that's not a lot, but they're holding the line also. Fleet Maintenance Fund. They have rental charges for city-owned vehicles and equipment to all departments. That's how they generate their revenue for operations and capital replacement. Plus, we have outside governmental customers, outside the government customers, that are generating about $154,000 in revenue. And they're continuing to look at ways to provide that service for other cities and agencies. The rental rate charge covers the maintenance, fuel, insurance, and replacement cost of those vehicles. The rental income has reduced here again, basically due to reduction in employees and some potential privatization of some functions. Compensated absences fund accounts for sick and vacation accruals for all funds. It's all employees of the city, not just the general fund. It's all water, sewer, everyone. It's a separate fund to account for those liabilities, so all the operating funds don't have to account for this. Otherwise, each fund would have to have set up their own liability for any accrued vacation and sick time. This again is down significantly due to the reduction in full-time employees, and will continue to reduce. That fully funds any sick and vacation time that's accrued by employees.
Mayor,
Councilman Beltrame?
what is the maximum accrual of time that we allow?
Which group, what employee, what
Okay, give me a range.
4 to 5 weeks, is that, or like 20 years service?
Thank you.
I think there's 12 sick days a year, 1 sick day a month, I think is accrued. Pretty much standard, but vacation, we're based on years of service, there's a schedule. The unemployment insurance fund, we're a member of the Michigan Municipal League self-insurance pool for this. This cost is going up, of course, due to our increased number of layoffs and utilization. For a number of years, there was hardly any kind of charge at all for this. Right now, we're up to probably around $221,000 for next year. It may go up a little more than that, based on utilization. Workers' compensation fund, once we're also with the Michigan Municipal League on this in the self-insured pool. We show an increase here, but that, I think we're gonna come in under that number a little bit, but in our line item in the budget, we have workers' comp and unemployment together as one line item. I think our unemployment may be a little low, and this may be a little high, so I think they'll work each other out here. But, we did have a very good year for our experience rate and so forth, and not a lot of serious accidents and so forth. So we do have reductions to our premiums based on our good results. That pretty much covers the internal service funds. Any questions
Questions on your part?
on those funds?
Nurse Fairfield?
On slide 73, the fleet maintenance fund, I didn't really understand the interest in the rent, what that's really generated from. I have 2 questions on that slide.
Interest and rents, that's their, interest and rents?
Yes.
That's, well, it earns interest income, and the rents are the rental charges to all the various departments,
So
citywide,
all internal charges,
Internal
citywide, rather allocated.
to all funds, water fund, sewer fund, general fund, street funds, everything. That's how they generate their rents, interest and rents. The rents portion, which is a major portion of that, is what they generate in their rental income.
Go ahead.
Oh, again, on the same slide, 73, total expenses projected this year, $4,838,000. I don't even know how many vehicles we have, but can you tell me what the cost per vehicle is? We're looking at $4,838,000 in expenses. What are we spending per vehicle, or how would you?
Okay, none of those are vehicles, and that, the, at the very bottom line, the 1.4 million,
Yes.
that is for the capital outlay. That would include the vehicles and equipment. And I believe in the budget document, under their department, there is a listing of the vehicles and the estimated purchase price, back in tab, internal service funds.
You misunderstood the question. I know that that's the capital for the vehicles we're going to be buying.
Right.
But I'm looking at the expense of $4,838,000. How many vehicles is that spread over?
It's
Is that
all vehicles and all
DPW,
pieces,
police
it's
cars?
everything. It's all police cars, all city vehicles, all backhoes, all loaders, all dump trucks, pickup trucks.
Right.
I'm not sure how many numbers there are.
Somebody else.
There's roughly between, depending on when we're selling and buying, but 400 or 500 pieces of equipment and vehicles.
500?
Yeah. And I can get you that specific number, but I know it's over 500.
Yeah, like a breakdown, if there's some breakdown or something on that.
Well, we do have, if you're looking at the cost of those, there is a rental rate that we charge on every different piece of equipment. police cars that are equipped with certain equipment at a certain rate. Other vehicles, you know, the pickups and the cars, backhoes, they all got specific rates that are set based on their actual costs that we track. And those costs are less than what, some of them significantly less than what the state allows us in their vehicle rate program that they have and produce every year.
Okay. Just be curious to see those units.
And our rates do includes everything, the insurance, the fuel, the replacement cost of that vehicle. So no department has to, the police department doesn't have to budget to buy police cars. It's built into their monthly rate that they get charged for that.
Okay. Oh, Councilman Curran, same thing?
On fleet, there were a lot of very good examples of insourcing, and I'm very pleased to see the department doing that. There was also in the narrative, though, examples of where it was anticipated that insourcing would decrease. And I don't know whether that's because other local units of government are eliminating certain things, but I was wondering if there could be a comment on that.
Probably just an overall reduction, like we're experiencing an overall reduction in our rental charges that we're going to be generating here. They're not, you're downsizing your fleets, you're down those type of things. I imagine it's the same thing.
I want to applaud the department for working so hard to develop that insourcing. It's done a really good job.
Okay. You want to go to the next one?
So our last section, debt service funds, we have a proposed tax rate of 0.50 mils. And we'll cover the general debt fund, the Rochester Road, proposal A, B, and C's. We'll look at some scheduled principal interest, payments for all funds, and projected millage rate requirements. We continuously review our outstanding debt to determine if refunding or reissuing could save the city money. As you may recall, just a couple months ago, we just refunded all our 2001 series bonds for the proposal A, B, and C, which will save approximately $600,000 in interest costs over the life of those bonds. That was a huge save. We look at those continuously, and whenever it makes sense and financial sense to do it, we try to take advantage of that. So that was a big savings. Those savings are factored into our remaining maturity life schedules that are contained here. So the debt service fund itself, the 0.50 mils will generate about $2.4 million in property taxes. We're using some other fund balance to generate about $3.2 million to cover our debt service and some administrative charges. The 0.50 mils will service the proposal A, B, and C bonds. The 2000 MTF, or Michigan Transportation Fund bonds, for the Rochester Road Big Beaver intersection project. Those bonds are being funded currently by the DDA, and we have about $850,000 outstanding debt on that with the final maturity in 2014. Proposal A bonds were the 1999 bonds that were issued for streets. And we issued $11 million for street improvements. There's about $8 million outstanding on those bonds. Final maturity 2021 for those bonds. Next year we have about $851,000 principal interest payments. Proposal B was for public safety bonds. We issued $18 million back in '99. That funded the Fire and Police Training Center, the new police administrative wing, and fire station number 3. We have of the $18 million, about $12.4 million is still outstanding as of June 30th, and once again, the final maturity is 2021 for those. The last set of bonds are proposal C, which are for recreation facilities and parkland acquisition. We issued $18 million in 1999 and 3 years after. A total of $18 million. Community center is $12 million, and parkland acquisition $6 billion. Of the $18 million, we have $6.4 million outstanding, final maturity 2021. We had refunded and paid off and advance funded some of those to some of the higher interest rate bonds a couple years ago
Right.
to bring that down quite a bit. The projected millage rate requirements, looking forward now, based on our revised and our current estimates of taxable value for the next several years, we're able to basically hold the .50 mills through 2013. After that point, we still have the continued drop in taxable value, which we are at some point probably. We're going to need to increase that rate up to approximately .88 mills in 2014 to cover the debt service. These are general obligation, unlimited tax bonds, which means they have a pledge of the full faith and credit of the city, and whatever taxes are necessary to pay for that bond are authorized to be levied to pay for those. So at that point, we'll have to look at that and see. That'll be a little bit down the road. It's beyond our 3-year budget, but just beyond it. So we'll have to take a look at that at that time.
Councilman Duffy, anything to say?
Well, I asked Mr. Lamarato a question earlier today, and I think with us knowing that we're taking some of the .75 in the debt millage and putting it toward other projects, some explanation of why we can't save some of that and
Sure.
kind of bank it might be
Right.
in line.
We can't levy more than what is required to pay the next year's bonds. So we can't say, well, it'd be nice if we could say, instead of flatten out some of the future years, let's say let's levy, let's go to our .75 now and level it out a little bit, but we cannot levy more than what our next year's bond payments are. So that kind of restricted. It doesn't make a lot of, but that's the way the law is.
No, it's fine. We'll come up with suggestions too.
Okay.
I think that wraps up
Questions
the
on this section?
debt service fund.
Council, other questions on any of tonight's sections that came to mind that you didn't ask during the presentation of that particular section? Remember, there are a section of the budget that we're going to be covering on May 3rd, the capital project, the enterprise fund, the 3-year budget, and the wrap-up. And I think that's what you were indicating, Mr. Zerlike, about if we had some things that we still have, questions on and all. We're going to do that after we go through those sections, correct?
That's up to you and the governing body. It would be great to get direction on how you wish to expend the $2.8 million, and you know all the options.
Right.
I just think it'd be good to go through get through everything, and then we have the wrap-up section.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
next week.
those
Very
sections,
end.
yeah.
Next week.
Yeah.
Right, on the 3rd, okay. That's why I was asking about that.
My response is for next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Council, have any other questions? Okay, when we take public comment, I'd like to remind folks that our limit is 5 minutes per person. You don't have to take 5 minutes, just less. And we're also going to ask that you come to the microphone when I call upon you, and that you not repeat something that someone else has already said this evening on those items. So is there anyone who wishes to make a public comment at this time? We'll up here so I can see. Yes, ma'am, will you please come over here to the microphone and give us your name?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Rita Subedar, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you today. I have lived in this city and been a loyal patron to the Troy Public Library my entire life. I've watched the debate on the millage proposal and the library closure from the very beginning, and I am distressed to learn that the administration is preparing for the closing of the library next year by laying off 38 library staff members starting this June. Of the Troy Public Library staff, more than half of them are Troy residents. Laying off library staff members this year and closing the library next year would mean that 52 Troy residents will lose their jobs and will be liabilities to the city in a host of ways, including spurring foreclosures in the city and further reducing Troy's property tax revenue. Reducing Troy's deficit by taking away jobs from Troy residents is nothing short of perverse. Furthermore, what family will buy a home in the city when it doesn't have a library, a basic municipal service that almost every other city offers? During the public comment periods in the council meetings leading up to the vote on the millage, hundreds of Troy residents made it clear that they do not want to live in a city that does not have a library. Whether people were for or against the millage, all were in agreement that they were against the library closing. Moving forward with the administration's plan will only add yet another vacant property to Troy's landscape, this time a vacant building where a library once stood. Librarians are pillars of our community. The hardworking staff of the library have worked here, some for over 20 years, devoting their lives to the principle that education is a right. I, along with many of my friends and classmates, have grown up with the library. From grade school up through college and law school, the library has always been a place for me to study, do research, and find good books to read. Many parents will tell you they rely on librarians to help their children with book reports and school projects and to make sure their children have a safe place to study after school. The women and men of the Troy Public Library staff are dedicated to providing free access to education. But you already know how important the library is to this city. Countless Troy residents have stood up here and told you what the library means to them. And even people who voted against the millage made it clear that there had to be some other solution that could prevent the library from closing. They brought up the very valid point of wasteful city spending. Longevity checks and payouts for sick time and vacation time are good things, but even the most liberal organizations would recognize that it cannot afford to provide these perks during these lean times. I am positive that city employees would gladly volunteer to give up these perks and make additional concessions in order to keep their jobs. Honorable council members, whether or not you decide to go through with the layoffs this spring, I hope that whatever decision you make will be one that you will be able to sleep with at night. Because I know that ever since the city announced its plan to start layoffs, the hardworking women and men of the Troy Public Library staff have not. Thank you.
Anyone else that wishes to speak? Yes, Rhonda?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Rhonda Hendrickson with the Friends of the Troy Public Library, yet again here to see you all. I'd like to address some points that the Friends feel that should be communicated to you as well as the citizens of the community. I would just like to remind everyone who will be affected by the library closing, and this is just a sample. Children of all ages, all residents and non-residents, current and potential business owners, students of all ages, unemployed people, parents, homeschool families, investors, foreign language patrons, children with special needs, senior citizens, and life learners, to name a few. What library services will be affected? Here are but a few. Reduced hours or closure, reduction in staff causing less service availability, no children's programming, no adult programming, no cultural programming, no book clubs, no internet, computer access, no periodical or database access, no job seeker assistance or employment workshops, long lines for patrons, no new materials, and longer waits for materials to go through records and back on shelves. Where will residents go to use a library? Residents will have to go to a library that will sell them a non-resident library card. Currently, Clawson is $100 per person per year, Royal Oak $75, Madison Heights $50, Sterling Heights $200, Warren $200. Troy residents will not be able to check out materials from Rochester Hills, Baldwin, or Bloomfield Township. What is the library doing to cut costs now? The upcoming fiscal budget is now being reduced from $3.6 million to $2.2. Collection budget is cut by $325,000 and staff is reduced from 100 to 70 employees. Library hours are reduced from 65 to 55 hours. That's 1/3 the staff, 1/3 the operating budget, and almost 50% of the collection budget, with only a 15% reduction in hours. That means a sizable workload with less staff, budget, and time. Mr. Zerlag made the comment last week's study session that it's a shame that the library is being somewhat punished for operating as an efficient operation. That says a great deal about what we're saying here. The voters asked for good stewardship, better money management, and a show of understanding of the times we face, and the library has faced those challenges squarely and should be given the opportunity to allow those changes to produce results. What is the effect of a July 2000 closure date? A Seattle study of library value to a city indicates that a community with no library has a negative impact on community character, identity, and livability. Those three things have a negative impact on property values, economic development, and desirability to potential residents and businesses. It will be difficult to keep library employees if they know that the date is looming. It may be necessary to further erode services and hours if there's an exodus of staff that might find it necessary to find future or more permanent employment. Seeking grant money is not an option when grants are primarily for specific programs, not to cover the operating costs of an organization. No foundation is going to give money to a library that's going to close anyway. There's no return on investment here. Like the Friends, we are willing to give money, as always, to the library, but not if there's a permanent closing date. That would not be a good use of the money that people have entrusted to us. The negative impact of closure far outweighs any savings realized in the short term. Cutting the library will not get us to the goal that we need to prevent the erosion of the further of our community. A line-by-line second look and a further tightening of various categories could get the money needed to keep the library open at reduced levels. Then it might be possible to explore alternative or long-term solutions for funding the library in more creative ways. But if you close it, it will be cost prohibitive to reopen it. What do we value in Troy? We cannot be a first-class city without a public library. There is no denying that fact. The City Council and administration in 1963 knew that, and you do too. The City Council must set the standard for how the city manages the tough times and keeps its core values. The library is a core value in this community. Residents have emailed you and phoned you to tell you that. The Friends and over 1,000 signatures and counting have told you that, and you know that. Don't let anyone or anything convince you otherwise. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Did I see your hand, sir? Yes. Do you have something to repeat that either lady did not?
My name is Kul Gauri. I have been resident of the city of Troy for the last 25 years. And the reason we moved here also primarily was that the quality of life, city of tomorrow, and what we have accomplished here. Our son went through the school here and he really enjoyed it, and now he's attorney in the city of Philadelphia. Other son who went through the same kind of school system lived here. He is now with the World Bank. What you are trying to do now is closing the library. You are trying to tell the outside community, not just within the city of Troy, that up to the outside community that this city is closed. City is not city of tomorrow, city of yesterday. City is going to be just like the old history we have, the Babylon of library, or Library of Alexandria, although probably came in and went away. And you look back and see the civilization, what has happened to civilization there also. One side we are trying to promote the Boys and Girls Club. Other side we are trying to close the library and the social pathology. The effect on the children, effect on the community, effect on the boys and girls, that will be very detrimental, very devastating. From that viewpoint, I strongly recommend you to look at it carefully and don't make the city of tomorrow city of yesterday. Thank you.
I saw a hand over there. Yes, ma'am, on the end.
Hi, my name is Maureen Enright. There were two things when I was looking through the budget that maybe I'd like answered or questions on to further reduce. Obviously, this first one is not going to, by any means, save the library, but additional funding is the car and cell phone allowances. Cannot find it in the budget. Just wondering what the balance is for this next budget, if that's a key factor, if that's a substantial amount of money that can be reduced for any type of service, and as well as the longevity payment program, which I know somebody very briefly mentioned, but the amount of money would fund the museum, which I'm for the library, but as well as for the museum and the historical center and the nature center and, obviously the Boys and Girls Club and every fund that is not being funded in this next budget. So I guess these two, have you considered eliminating that program? And are any of these substantial amounts of money that can be reduced or eliminated? That's kind of it.
Thank you.
You can
Anyone
answer
else?
that.
Anyone else that wishes to speak on a public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can't quite reach the mic, but hopefully you can hear me. My name is Edna Abraham, and I'm a lifelong resident of Troy. I'm 34 years old, and what you see before you is a 26-year-old library card. I got it when I was 8 years old. I had just learned cursive. In the 26 years since I've gotten it, I've graduated summa cum laude from high school. I've gone to U of M, and I've gone to Wayne State to get my master's degree. None of that would have been possible without the Troy School District, of course, some strict parents, but also with the Troy Public Library. I am shocked, I am appalled, I am mortified that we're even having this conversation today, that there is not going to be a public library, July 1st, 2011. What are we saying to Southeast Michigan when Troy, which has been a jewel of the community for decades, is taking out some of its crown jewels from its tiara? And guess what? The tiara is made of iron pyrite, and that's fool's gold to those who don't know what iron pyrite is. I implore City Council to reconsider. I've heard a lot of discussion about property values and what's happened in the past few years, and no one could have predicted the financial crisis of the past couple years. No one, and I can't fault anyone for that. But what is this city going to look like in 10 years? What are its property values going to look like then? When the library is gone, no one wants to move here. What family is going to want to live in a district that does not have a library? I'm sorry. We're looking at things in a very short-term basis. We got to look at it from a long view. Apologize for speaking so emotionally. I've never done this before, but I couldn't help myself. This is ridiculous.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. We'll return it to the council table. We're meeting again next Monday to talk about further items and review things. So if there are no other items to come before, then we'll be in adjournment.